one of the hidden secrets of the strategy work is that once you understand what good strategy is, you find that despite all the consultants that you have around, most companies do a horrible job of creating strategy. And no surprise there. According to the Balance Scorecard Institute, 67% of well-crafted strategies fail. Think about that, 67%. And consulting is a multi-billion-dollar business. Worse, according to, I think this is still from the Harvard Business Review, 90% of frontline staff have no idea what the strategy is. Now think about that.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever it is, depending on which time zone you are in. But we have some amazing content lined up today. One of the things is OKRs. I'm not sure many people know about OKRs, but we'll certainly go deeper into understanding what OKRs are in this episode as well. But OKRs are powerful. I think it's a way to really channel everybody and really help nurture purposeful workforce and through that achieve amazing goals along the way. Yet many organizations haven't really cracked how to deploy OKRs in their businesses. And a couple of things that we have seen is OKRs are very set and forgotten. You start with high enthusiasm, you start with a bunch of OKRs, and no one cares about them as you go deep into the pot. They're neither part of the regular business cadences, nor they really interfere in the way the businesses operate. Now, if you're not going to enforce and implement OKRs in a certain way, what is the point of taking all that effort in investing upfront in setting up the OKRs to begin with? So in order to really harness the full potential of OKRs, we need to understand how to really deploy them. Is there a framework that we can think about how businesses can truly embrace the power of OKRs and achieve big goals? And that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode. We'll try to understand how to execute OKRs in businesses. With that, I have a well-known name in the OKR world, Mukom, with us today. Mukom, so why don't you sort of start with a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Pradeep and Pradeep, and thank you very much for inviting me to your amazing show. Yes. Yeah. So my name is Mukom. My day job, I work as a head of capacity building for one of the 5 companies that manages internet resources. So if you're getting on the internet anywhere in the world, the company I work for, in the afternoon, we make sure that there's not a clash in addresses. So I mostly train network engineers how to build next generation internet networks. And I come to this management strategy stuff out of necessity, right? Because I went from the guy who was building the networks, training other people how to do the networks, to forming a team and then starting to figure out strategy. So everything that I teach you comes from practice, painful practice. So of course, I read the theory. I'm an engineer, so I love theory. I like to understand the cause and effect relationships between different pieces. Fundamentally, if I make a recommendation on this podcast, is because I have tried it in practice, for myself and my team. My side hustle, my side job is that I'm a co-founder of what I call the Chief Excellence Officer Academy, which is simply I'm trying to build the next generation of frontline managers who are their companies, what I call special forces when it comes to executing strategy. And we call it the Chief Excellence Officer Academy. And so OKRs is one of the tools that, I get to teach lots of teams, lots of managers all over the world, and same with 4DX and Lean Six Sigma.
Awesome. And what exactly is an OKR?
That is an excellent question, because an OKR, the abbreviation stands for Objective and Key Results. Fundamentally, it is nothing more than a multidimensional goal. Nothing more than that, right? Objective, what are we trying to accomplish? We will accomplish the objective as measured by key result 1, key result 2, key result 3. Now, why do I call it a multidimensional goal? This is a fundamental difference between OKRs and something like a KPI. A KPI stands on its own, right? There's weight, there's height. But a key result, which is the equivalent of the KPI, makes no sense unless you pair it with its objective and other key results. And the reason that's why I could say it's a multi-dimensional goal, where each dimension, the key result represents each dimension of reality. And the first time where we saw this whole idea of, we have to be multidimensional in how we measure things. It was from the balance scorecard. You remember the balance scorecard, right? The idea was that you just could not say a company is doing well because financially it was doing well. You had to look from the financial perspective, the customer perspective, the internal business perspective, the people perspective, right? That was where that concept comes from. And so OKR is another articulation of that same concept, that success is always multidimensional. It's not one metric, and those metrics work together. And one of the things I like to say is, whenever I teach, and I like to use the example of personal health because everyone can relate to it. And if you can make sense of it at a personal level, then you can relate it back to business. You are healthy not just because you are below a certain weight. I could be below 60 kilograms of weight, but my blood is flowing with sugar, right? I'm not healthy. So if you wanted to create an OKR for health, it would be a combination of your weight, your blood sugar level, and something like your amount of stress as measured by the cortisol in your bloodstream, right? So the objective measures the short-term mission you want to accomplish, and how would you know that you've accomplished it? Specific, quantifiable indicators. Each of them are key results. So an OKR is nothing more than a multidimensional goal.
Nice. That's an amazing explanation for OKRs. And a lot of the people also confuse OKRs with KPIs, but you're right. I think KPIs, they're just metrics. They don't have meaning unless we associate them with some kind of an activity or an objective. And you're right. I think if someone wants to become healthy, then they can have a bunch of KPIs indicating whether they're healthy or not, and key results that they can track to improve, to achieve the goal that they set out to be. Wonderful. Let's talk about some of the other definitions as we go deeper into this subject. So can we help us understand what lead versus lag indicators are?
Good. So every time we are trying to measure something, there's two ways. So when I talk about an indicator could be a metric or measure or KPI, right? That tells us, quantifies progress for us. Now, every indicator is either evidence or it's a signal. So let's take the common example of, say, you're trying to lose weight. Now, you say, how do I know that I have lost weight? It's because at some point I'll step on a scale and my weight is 60 kilograms or 50 kilograms. That is evidence because, you see, there is an event that we are trying to get to, that is losing weight. Once we arrive there, we see evidence. That's what we call a lagging indicator. I am not at 60 kg because I have achieved that goal already. That's a lagging indicator. Another one would be, sales in a company. Another one would be, say, employee satisfaction within a team, right? You have those good numbers or bad numbers because the thing you're trying to accomplish has already happened. Make sense? The thing about, we need those quantitative measures of evidence. But the problem is that these things are terrible at engagement because once I step on that scale, my fate is sealed. I've either achieved it or I've failed. But if you want to encourage a team, you want some kind of mechanism, something that tells you early on whether you are on the right track. And that's why we have the idea of a signal. So take, for example, sticking with the example of weight loss example. One of the things you could track would be to say, there is no single activity that you can do every day and then step on a scale and see your weight has gone down or up. It is very rare, right? but you can track the number of steps you take every day, or you can track your calorie deficit every day. That is a signal because if it is headed in a certain direction, so if you are constantly in a calorie deficit, that is a signal that you are likely to hit to attain your goal of losing weight. It is not guaranteed, but it is highly correlated, highly causal. So that is a leading indicator. So leading indicator is a signal of progress. The lagging indicator is evidence that we've accomplished something.
Nice. That's
why did I bring this up with respect to OKRs? Because there's two schools of thought when it comes to OKRs. That some says your key results must be leading indicators. I am of the school that says your key results must be lagging indicators, because I want to know as a team that I have arrived. It's evidence that I've arrived, not a signal that I might be on track. It is also important, which is why I'll talk about it in the later stage of our conversation.
Yeah. No, it's simple and it's profound at the same time. And to summarize, lagging indicator is more like an evidence of whether you achieved something or not. And leading indicators will help us understand that we are on track to achieving the lagging indicator. So
That's correct.
in
That's
this, in
correct.
your particular case, someone wants to
Mm-hmm.
reduce the weight. Whether you reduce the weight, only the scale can tell us at some point. But are we on track to really achieving that is depends on various other indicators like the calorie intake or trying to work out or cardio, and these could be the leading indicators to get there. But that brings an interesting question. So it looks like with OKRs, you have an objective and you have key results, which are lagging indicators, as you said, because
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, key results should tell us whether we have achieved the objective or not.
That's right.
Now, the OKR as a system doesn't seem to give us any provision to have those leading indicators. Is that a flaw, or is that something that we missed out as in the framework itself?
So that's an interesting question because, okay, prior to coming to OKRs, I come from the world of Lean Six Sigma, and I'm a four DX. Do you know 4DX? Four disciplines of execution. It's a strategy
No.
execution framework from Franklin Covey. It's a very amazing. I would say in many respects, actually more. If you actually wanted to get something done, you wanted it guaranteed. I'd say 4DX is probably a better framework for getting it done. The problem is that the problem in quote unquote is that first of all, it's proprietary to Franklin Covey, which means that 4DX is a proprietary methodology for strategy execution with a very strict body of knowledge. This is how you do X, Y, and Z. OKRs are open source, right? Which means that the foundational definition of OKRs came from the book High Output Management by Andy Grove. That's when the word objectives and key results were mentioned. And when he wrote the concept of a key result, he was thinking of a milestone. So over time, because it's open source, there's been different definitions coming in. So yes, there are some people who do make it work with key results as leading indicators. That's totally fine. I just happen to be, it has to be lagging indicators simply because the way I tend to work, I want to know that I have arrived. It is not to say that it's not important. And so I often tell my coaching clients that if it really matters to you, my standard definition is 3 key results. But if you really want to mix both lagging and leading indicators, go up to 5, where you mix a couple of both lagging indicators and leading indicators, all in those key results. Now, the reason I don't want to have key results as leading indicators is because a characteristic of a leading indicator is that there is never certainty. It could change. And because I don't want to keep changing my key result over time, I'd rather keep the key results as lagging indicators, and then separately measure a set of signals, leading indicators, that I can change once I see that they're no longer serving me.
Totally.
But if you really want to die on that hill, I say by all means, use leading indicators or do a mix of leading and lagging indicators.
Awesome. Yeah, that's such a great explanation, because if we know what the leading indicators are, if we know what the lagging indicators are, and if we know what the leading indicators are, now what will humans do? We can maybe automate everything and then set it in autopilot, because that totally makes sense. I think leading indicators are something that you need to figure out, change, iterate, maybe all the activities that probably go into an OKR. They should have that flexibility to operate on to achieve the goal. So that sort of makes sense. And I also like what you said. OKR is not like set in stone. So this is an open source framework, and people can really change it to what works for them as well, as long as they know how to set the objectives and they know how to measure whether they achieve the objectives or not. So that makes sense. And can you also sort of talk about the OKR system as a whole, when it from the lens of, let's say, a regular business?
Now, I often like to say, if OKR is a solution, what is the problem? Are you familiar with jobs theory, jobs to be done theory? It is this notion that every product carries a solution, and people hire your product and its solution to get a job done. The idea comes from, the idea is often articulated like, you don't buy an iPod or because you want to listen. An iPod, you buy an iPod because to get the job of listening to music on the go, right? And the iPod is just one solution. Before that, it was a Walkman by Sony. Before that, it could be one of those cheap MP3 players of no branding. They both, all of these things, that are solutions to the job of listening to music on the go, right? Now, the concept of jobs theory is that, I love this because this is a very formal definition of what a need is in business. So
Mhm.
if OKRs are a solution, what is the
Mhm.
problem? The problem is that if you are a manager, someone who leads a team that creates, delivers, supports, and sells, services, your number one responsibility is to create value in line with the business model of the company. And the way you
Mhm.
do this is by transforming strategy into results through your team. Make sense?
Mhm.
So who is the person that is going to hire OKRs as a solution? A manager who runs a team. For what job? For what problem? For what need? The need is I've got a strategy. I want to transform that strategy into results. So OKRs is one solution that you can hire to help you accomplish the job of transforming strategy into results. And why is this necessary? If you look, one of the hidden secrets of the strategy work is that once you understand what good strategy is, you find that despite all the consultants that you have around, most companies do a horrible job of creating strategy. And no surprise there. According to the Balance Scorecard Institute, 67% of well-crafted strategies fail. Think about that, 67%. And consulting is a multi-billion-dollar business. Worse, according to, I think this is still from the Harvard Business Review, 90% of frontline staff have no idea what the strategy is. Now, think about that. 90% of the people who come into the company get paid every week or every month and spending time working have no idea what strategy is. And strategy is supposed to be the company's set of choices for creating long-term sustained competitive advantage in the market. 67% of them fail because 90% of the frontline employees have no idea what the strategy is. OKR solve this problem. And OKR, when you create an OKR, you articulate a strategic objective, but at the level of the team so that it is relatable to the team that's actually going to deliver the work to create that long-term competitive advantage for the company. So that is that is the rule of OKRs. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The profoundness of this OKR just comes up with every explanation. Like, look at what you just said, right? So, let's say a company of 3,000 people, they
Mhm.
can do anything, and they can choose to do a million things,
Yes.
and those million things might not make sense to all the people, which sort of ends up where everyone's doing their own thing. Like,
Mhm.
literally everyone's rowing a boat in 10 different directions, and then you end up going nowhere. OKR is that one system, like you said, that sort of helps these managers translate the strategy into results through their people. Now that's like aligning everybody towards in one direction is so profound and so powerful. And OKRs is as a system is powerful, and I hope all the leaders are really realizing it. But this is the place to learn how to really nurture a purposeful workforce. Keep listening, and we'll talk about what is the job of OKRs. Can we address that question? So what exactly is the job of OKRs?
The job of it is this. As a frontline manager, my number one responsibility is to create value for the company, right? That's number to create value for the company through my team. Because remember, OKRs are not meant for individual on your team. They're a team sport. Yeah, you can hear people talk of individual OKRs that mean they're doing it wrong. Of
Hmm.
course, at home, as entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, you can have a personal OKR that's completely different from within an organization. Individual OKRs make no sense. OKRs are most powerful as at the level of a team. Now, as a manager, your number one responsibility is to create value for the company through your team. And the way you create that value is you create it aligned with the business model and also the company's strategy. So, the job of OKRs is to help you articulate the company's strategy or the vision in line with the business model in terms that your team understands so that they can make decisions every day, every week that align with the larger strategy and the vision of the company. And that's how you create value. That's the job of OKR.
Nice.
So just as an illustration, if you look behind me, there's an illustration you see behind me, a bowl of thread and then some activities and then needles. Can you see that?
Yeah,
That is like a metaphor for your team. You're like, think of these needles as your team members, right? Now, the act of that knitting, the act of knitting is your team working together, and the output is a piece of cloth. But this piece of cloth, is it going to be a bandage or a suit or wedding dress and all of that? OKRs define several things. One, it makes sure that these two needles or several needles are working together to create the right piece of cloth for a wedding gown or a suit or a sari or a mat. As a metaphor, that is the importance of an OKR. Without an OKR, there's going to be activity because so long as you pay people, right? People come to work, they're going to do something, right? So one person could be knitting something they think is a sari, another person is knitting something they believe is going to be a floor mat, and it's just going to end up going to be a mess. OKRs focus all the activities in a single direction about creating value. So that's a metaphor for OKR.
Awesome. So far we've learned why OKRs are important and how a manager should translate the strategy into results, and what are some leading and lagging indicators. Now let's actually talk about how to deploy these OKRs in the businesses. Let's understand the step-by-step process in which we can really deploy these OKRs in any business of any scale. Mukom, so can you help us deep dive into understanding the deployment process?
That's a good question. That's an excellent question. So remember I told you that at the beginning when you asked me what are OKRs, I said OKRs are nothing more than a multidimensional goal, right? That's what I said. OKRs are nothing more than a multidimensional goal, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But now, simply because you've set a goal doesn't mean you're actually going to, you still need to do something for that goal to become reality. That's the work. So there is OKR, the goal, but also to make it work and get value out of it, we need what I call an OKR process, step by step. How do you go from OKR to the actual results that the OKRs represent? And that's so one of the things that I came up with after, I've been doing OKRs for about 8 years now. I've trained a couple of different managers. I came up with what I call the SPAN process. S stands for setup, P for prioritize, A for activate, and N for nurture. So this is something that, this is a process that I train managers to go through, within a 90-day cycle so that they can go from here is an OKR that articulates some kind of value that I want to create with my team over the next 90 days. And here's a step-by-step process that I'm going to go to have that done. So that is the SPAN process. So we're going to take one by one each of these processes: set up, prioritize, analyze, and nurture. Shall we?
No. Awesome. Yeah, I think I like the breakdown here. So we want to achieve goals. Mm-hmm. So we've chosen OKR as a framework to achieve it. Now, how do you do that? With an OKR process. How do we, if anyone wants to understand what OKR process is, your process is called SPAN.
Yes.
And SPAN is like the first step is set up, and then prioritize, activate, and nurture. So let's go deeper and help us understand what setup is in this.
Good. So the reason I came up with this, because I came up with this after about my second year. Remember, I come from the world of 4DX and Lean Six Sigma, which means I'm used to a very rigorous, systematic way of doing things. What do you think most teams do when they want to create OKRs? In your experience, what do most teams do?
Most teams, they get some guidance around the strategy, mm-hmm. and then they will just create some goals. And the goals are often, they know what they're working on, so they try to somehow map it to the strategy. And then they're forgotten. And they're not part of one-on-ones. They're not part of any cadences. And no one cares about them until next quarter.
That's excellent. That's an excellent answer. Now, a goal is meaningless without strategy. But more important, it is meaningless without context. Strategy is just one part of the operational context. And so that's what I'm saying. So you see, most teams, in fact, if you see most guidance on the internet says, let's brainstorm. Okay, I say, by all means, before you ever start talking about OKRs, clarify context. That's why I call setup. One of the things you've just pointed out is, what is the strategy? Because the strategy is that set of choices that the company within which we work has made in order to make sure that we create and sustain long-term competitive advantage in the marketplace. But that's not the only thing. The other part, in fact, for the level of a team, more important when it comes to creating context is to what is the story about how your team creates, delivers, and captures value within the company. Are you familiar with the business model canvas?
No.
The business model canvas, that is arguably one of the best strategy frameworks in the world, because it is how it's a one-page definition, visual model that describes, you can take it for every company. This is how the company creates, delivers, and captures value. Now, but for the level of a team that works within a company, I mean, after trying the business model canvas, I thought something else was more appropriate, simply because it goes back to this visual that you see on my screen here. That if you go to any team and you ask people, whenever you go to, say, a conference and you meet someone at the conference, what's the first question you ask them?
Where do you work?
Where do you work? What do you do? You don't ask them, what value do you create? Do you? No one says that. You have to be a weirdo to ask that question. It is, what do you do? The way that because remember that statistic I said, according to this balance scorecard, that says 90% of employees have no idea what the strategy is, right? But 100% of the employees know what it is they do. You can tell them, I am a software engineer, I write code, I'm a designer, I'm a marketer, I'm a salesperson. So they know the activities that they do. Your job as a manager is to go beyond those activities. What outputs do those activities create? Who uses those outputs? And what outcomes comes out of those outputs? And what is the impact over long term? Right? So that is the story that you, the manager, should build to define the operational context. It is a story of how your team creates, delivers, and captures value for the company. And so for that, I created this tool, which I call the Zipper Canvas. So can you see my screen? Good. So as a team, this is a one-page document that describes how your team creates, delivers, and captures value. Because once you get this right, OKRs become very easy. Because first of all, it is a lens through which you look through at the strategy. It is a lens through which you look through to value that you create. And value is always defined by the customer. And every team has a customer. Whether it is outside the company, like, the users of your product or the purchasers of your service, or it is, within the company, like if you say the guys in engineering, their customers might be the guys in design or sales or marketing, so to speak. So everyone has a customer. So this one page defines the operational context within which OKRs work. And if you see, it is centered on this. Step 1, processes and projects. Those are the activities. Remember we said every 100% of the people that work in every team know the things that do the activities, right? And in every organization, I don't care what kind of organization, there are only two kinds of activities. An activity is either a process or a project. What's the difference?
Process is more like a template, and projects is like initiatives that some of them might follow some of the processes. But I think there's a very confusing difference between processes and activity.
And now you understand why I created this canvas, because clarity at this is important. Projects are one-off activities. Something you start has a clear end. For example, build a new app, an iPhone app, when you didn't have one before. That's a project. It has a clear end. It's going to start and end at some point. At that point, everyone shuts down. We've created a thing, we go away, right? Create an iPhone app, or build a new website, or construct a building or a bridge, or build a spaceship. A process, on the other hand, is something that you do over and over, ideally exactly the same way. An example would be recruit and onboard a new employee. You want to do this exact same way every single time. So all the activities that people do in the team are either processes or projects. And so all the tasks that people do belong to projects or processes. And together, they help the team accomplish the OKRs, maintain the KPIs, and therefore help the company realize its strategy. Make sense? Good. So, did you have a question before you proceed?
No, I think it makes sense. But projects are something where we initiate and create something new. whereas
Yes.
processes are, very repetitive. Like you said, like hiring somebody. So we all have the same set process, and they keep happening in the loop. It's an activity, but it doesn't produce anything new. It produces something that's
Yes.
expected.
Yes.
Yeah,
It
that makes sense.
produces something, and but the thing is that you want it, the quality of that thing, they never go down, right? And here's the
Mm,
dirty little secret: unless you are a project management consulting, right,
mm,
or a startup, more value is created in the company through processes than through projects. Even in
mm,
life, what are the two most important things that happen in life? Photosynthesis and respiration. Those are
mm,
processes, not projects, because they
mm,
happen the exact same way every single time. And if you don't happen the exact same way, what happens? We literally die.
mm, mm,
So imagine if every employee that came into your company was onboarded a different way. One person will end up with a Mac and has no idea what they should be sitting. The next person ends up with a Windows, and it's just going to be a mess. So for
mm,
processes, we want a reduction in variability. It produces outputs, but we want those outputs to be at the same standard, never changes. So most of your
mm,
KPIs are going to be maintained by processes. Now, most of your key results are going to come from driven by projects. And sometimes you know this, for example, sometimes a company gets too big, culture gets bad. It means that the recruitment and onboarding process is not working the way we want it to, right? Therefore, and this brings something that happens quite common, that it is not as if there's always a KPI at some point can become a key result.
mm,
When it ceases to operate
mm,
within the expectation that we've set for it, then we can make a key result out of it. And then once we improve it to where we want it to be, then we can drop it to just being a KPI. So
mm,
processes and projects. Now, but more important, of those two, they produce outputs. They produce outputs, right? Outputs are the result of the activities, whether those
mm,
activities are projects or the activities, those outputs. But now, that example of an output is a code that the team writes. It's a design
mm,
that the design team writes. It's the plans that the architects have drawn, right? It is the estimates from, say, the quantity surveyor. These are outputs that come
mm,
from a certain activity, which is maybe research, writing code. It is only value. So we are trying to go from activities towards value. And the key thing in there is what the customer. The customer is that entity, usually a person for B2C or another business in the B2B, that uses the output of your team's activities. And when it consumes that output, and it gets a benefit from it in the short to medium term, that is an outcome. And over the long
mm.
term, it is what we call an impact. So, for example, let's take this example you and I are doing right now. We are engaged in an activity. We are recording a podcast. What's going to be the output?
A process, a knowledge for people to learn and deploy OKRs.
Yeah, the output is going to be a podcast episode on your YouTube channel,
Mm,
the Everyday Leadership YouTube channel. That is literally the
yeah.
output, right? But if it
Mhm.
sits there and no one ever watches it, have we created value? No,
No.
no.
Mhm.
But now, who is your customer? Who's the typical listener for you?
Business leaders and founders.
Good. Now, once a business leader goes onto YouTube and finds this podcast episode and they watch it and say, oh, and they can now do OKRs better, that is an outcome. There is value, right?
Mm,
Over the short to medium term. And if they do it consistently well, that they get a promotion at the end of 2 years, that is impact as a result
mm,
of consuming this output. So you
mm,
see how we are taking from this activity that we are doing, recording a podcast and climbing up the ladder of value. This
mm,
activity, whether it's a process or a project, it's an output which a customer consumes and they get a benefit from it. If that benefit is short to medium term, we call that an outcome. And if it's in the long term, we call that impact. So,
nice. And
so for a team, this is what we call the setup stage. Create context like this for your team. Because once you
mm,
do this, everyone is on the same page. This is what we do. This is why it matters. And this is how we measure it. If you look at the bottom, results metrics and production metrics. Why do I bring this here? Why do I say this is part of setup? One of the biggest problems with OKRs is that teams have no idea what they should be measuring. So they start
mm,
brainstorming, picking metrics from the thin air. But imagine you create a canvas like this. Then you can start creating what we call results metrics. How many users, how many subscribers? Number of subscribers becomes a results metric, right? How many
mm,
people refer the podcast? Number of
mm,
referrals
mm,
becomes a results metric, right? Number of people that maybe you, at the end of the day, maybe let's say I do a call to action and people actually answer that call to action. That is another metric, results metric. So there's all the things that are related to your customers, the outputs, the impact. Those are what we call results metrics. The ones that refer to your processes, your outputs, and your inputs are the production metrics. So once you have this, the company, that your team already has an idea of how we create value and the relevant indicators, the metrics. Some of them are going to be leading. Of course, naturally, your production metrics are leading indicators of your results metrics. So you have set the foundation to now say, what OKR should we create?
Nice. Absolutely love this process and canvas. So let me try and summarize this for the audience. At any company, we have people that are creating activities. And in this case, we're defining them as processes and projects. Processes are those that are they're in sort of an autopilot mode. They don't necessarily create anything new, but they are important. Whereas projects are like the new initiatives which have an origin, and at the end they create something new. And these activities, somehow these objective maps to outputs, and these outputs end of the day should cater some customer. It has to be someone internal, external, or you could be serving another internal team, but there are some people who are getting benefit out of the outputs that are being generated from the activities that your team is involved in. And these customers, now they will have outcomes and impact through the activities. The impact can then be measured using results and metrics, which should tell us whether the end impact is achieved through the initial activities or not. Now, whether all of this is going in the right direction is or not is being tracked in the leading indicators like production metrics, and all of the activities in these leading indicators obviously have some inputs, and those are captured as inputs and suppliers who are contributing to the leading indicators, which will eventually convert into impact, which is being proven by the result metrics in the end. So this is a canvas that you can apply to really brainstorm. Like if you're a new team, just you're starting your quarter with your planning, you can just capture the essence of all of the things that you're planning on doing for this quarter, and then just write it down in this framework, and then you can then convert it into OKR framework if it's available in your business, or at least you can use this to bring that clarity and purpose to the activities and your employees here. But awesome. And this is about the setup. Now let's talk about prioritize. Like, what if we have a billion activities, outputs, customers? So help us understand what is the next step in this framework.
That's excellent. So once you have setup done, everyone on your team knows this is enough, right? This is why what the things that I do on this team, this is why it matters, and this is how I can measure it. Now, when you have strategy, remember the job of OKRs is to translate strategy into results. And strategy is a set of choices. And the definition for good strategy are the things that you will not do. It means that it is not all of the activities that are equally important every time, right? The question is, how do we know which ones that are important? That's where we bring in an input of the company strategy. So if the strategy is, say, okay, we are going to get into the Indian market this quarter, then any project that has to do with India naturally takes what? Precedence. It simply means that for this quarter at least, most of the outputs have to be things that have to do with India. And the customers have to be customers that can get us to customers in India. And the outcomes are about creating more value for customers in India and creating more impact for customers in India. Same thing with the results measure. So there are two things. The SIPA canvas is the think of it as a value engine, how our team creates, delivers, and captures value. But at any time, any moment in point, which activities should we prioritize? Because the activities that we prioritize determine the outputs that we're going to focus more on, which determine the customers that we should pay more attention to, as well as the outcomes and impacts that we should be seeking. The thing that determines us, the company's strategy In the absence of strategy, you can look at a big problem. I mean, this thing for me, most startups don't really have what we consider good strategy, a set of five choices, five choice cascade. So you could say, what is the business problem that this startup is trying to solve? You can bring that in within the lens of your super canvas to say, what should our team be doing in terms of this problem that the startup is trying to crack? Or if it's an opportunity that the startup is trying to exploit, or a unit within an established company is trying to exploit, you can look at it through the lens of the super canvas. Because those inputs then determine, of all the 1,000,001 projects that we could be doing, why should we do A and B, and why should we not do D? Because you must have a reason to say there are things that we will not do, there are things that we will not improve, right? And that is prioritization. So if you're a startup, you can say, where are things going poorly within the startup or within the organization, within the team? That is prioritization. Then you can start from there and say, okay, fine. Do I want to fix this? And then based on that, you now create your OKR. Your OKR should be, how do I fix the metrics, whether it's results metrics or production metrics that are bad, with the understanding that when I fix them, they're going to go up. I'm going to create more value for more customers. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's what prioritize does.
No, absolutely. I'm sensing something super powerful and something misunderstood. Like, essentially, one of the things that I noticed with OKRs is, in most places, OKRs is very top down. Like, you get things from the top, and then you have to somehow find a way to, convert them into OKRs. But what you're suggesting is more powerful, and this looks very bottom up, which it should be, where you're suggesting, hey, you're a team, list out all the activities and their outputs and the outcomes and the impact. Now, once you have a list like that, now try and prioritize. Now you know what the strategy of the company is, how many of these activities naturally line up with what the company is trying to achieve, and they obviously take higher precedence and they are high in priority. And if you still have bandwidth, you can still accomplish some of the activities that you can by judging the impact and trying to really take on the projects that make sense to you, which means it actually came from the bottom, from the team. It naturally contributed to the top level organization. I say this powerful because, especially in organizations with 7 or 8 levels of hierarchy, people who are cooking up the strategy on the top, they have no idea what the teams at the bottom really are up to, and they don't know how much value can they bring. Like, if there is a team that knows that here is one activity that I can perform which can pretty much move the needle for a higher level strategy metric, now the top level strategy guys would have not dreamt that, there is not even imagined that something like that would have been possible. So one concern I've had with OKR is, hey, where is the input of bottom up? How are the teams contributing? But this framework really answers that question. But to summarize, you're saying, list out all the activities, whatever lines up with the strategy of the company, they take higher priority. And the others, you can use whatever prioritization framework that you want to apply. You can measure impact, and then you can naturally fill up your capacity with the high impact activities for the season. But yeah, totally makes sense.
Exactly. Now, so now you understand why I founded what I call the Chief Excellence Officers Academy. Is that if you're a frontline manager, the greatest source of long-term competitive advantage is powerful frontline managers. Imagine you run a company and one of your managers came to you with a one-page document that shows how your team creates, delivers, and captures value within the vision of the company. That person stands out immediately because they're thinking like an executive, which is what I call the Chief Excellence Officer. That is it, right? And this is organic bottom up. Because when you do this, the manager is going to do this with their team. So there's nothing like, oh, we didn't understand, because you co-create this. So you're starting from all the value on the company. Like I said, where are the products of the company created? The staff at the front line. Who sells them? The staff at the front line. Who does the marketing? The staff at the front line. Who collects the revenues? Who provides support? So to go sit in some ivory tower with billion-dollar consultants and create something and then push it down is the definition of stupid. That's why it's almost guaranteed to fail. And that's why I came up with this process.
Awesome. Perfect. Loved it. And yeah, let's talk about the next part. So we've set up and we've prioritized. And what is the next step?
Okay, so when you prioritize, now just the last part of prioritization, the last once you have an OKR, how do you know that you have a high quality OKR? That is why I have this. I created this. So most of these tools, I created these tools for my own use, and then I've used it for my coaching and my teaching as well. How do you know that you have a good quality OKR? You use what I call the OKR quality matrix. There are two matrices that tell you that you can use to evaluate. Think of it, I call it, so this is what some of my clients call it. They call it a stethoscope for an OKR. That makes sense? So I've created an OKR. How do I know that it's high quality? You have these two matrices. So for the objective, there are two things that are objective. That if you see that there are two levels. What is the objective aligned to? Yeah, what is the objective aligned to? It could be aligned to your boss's OKR. It could be aligned to the mission of the company. It could be aligned to a problem, to an opportunity, or to strategy. Does that make sense? Then that's the first thing. It is what is the team's OKR aligned to? These are the things that it aligns to. Now, then the second one is an OKR, an objective. The objective part of the OKR must be qualitative. It must have no number in it. So that's one dimension of the quality of the objective. And then also, it must be something that people are excited when they see it. Oh, it resonates with them emotionally. And then that's why we have the right dimension. Is it, I call that, is it t-shirt worth? So if I take something like, let's take an OKR, give me an example on objective. Let's take for this podcast. If what to do an objective, what would you have as an objective?
The objective is what you mentioned previously, like, someone really getting inspired and implementing OKRs and achieving goals through that.
Yes. So these two dimensions, the very first thing you pick out is what is it aligned to? In this case, it's aligned to, so for your podcast, is it aligned to your mission, to your strategy? You pick whatever it's aligned to, and then is this something that people are proud? I mean, this is one of those things that this is where you have to put the engineers, the mathematicians, the physicists hat away and think of it. You work with the team. Guys, if we made a t-shirt with our objective on it, would you like to wear it? Right? If it goes here, hell yes, then you're in good hands. Now, the other thing is that, is there a number in it? So you can never have an objective that says, make $3 million. That's a bad objective because there's a number in it. Numbers belong in the key results, never in the objective. So once you map like this, because the two dots fall on green, then you're fine. Your objective is fine. If anything falls on red, for example, there's a number like make $3 million. No. And the reason I call it a stethoscope is because once you map it like this, you know exactly what you need to do to fix this because there's a number in it. See, there's a problem here. It's a number in it. So you have to, once you remove the number, you come back here and you have a good objective. Then, of course, the same, you have a similar matrix for the key result, each key result. Each key result, does it relate to a task? Does it relate to a task, an output, a milestone, an outcome, or an impact? Now, you see how it relates to the super canvas that we're talking about later, right? And then also, every key result must be quantifiable. This is where your numbers. Without a number, you don't have a key result. And it must be influenceable. It must be something that is within the power of the team to do, right? So, of course, if it falls into red, it's bad. If it falls into green, it's good. And now you are now based upon this, understand why we go back here. This canvas, super canvas, it defines what is influenceable, what the team has power over. It is in here. Now you see why we started with this and not with brainstorming and OKR. That makes sense?
Yeah. And can you go back to that OKR matrix there? So you're suggesting any objective should be aligned to either the mission, problem, opportunity, or strategy, but not your boss's OKR. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. Should never be your boss. I love that. Never to your boss's OKR, because an OKR is a team sport meant to help the company. And the idea of a boss OKR, you're already going into this individual OKRs, which is generally bad practice. Forget about your boss's OKR. Go to because the boss owns the team OKR. Because once you give the boss an OKR, that is different. What is going to happen is that the boss is going to take it and impose it on the team, which just kills OKR. So the boss should not have an OKR. The boss owns the team's OKR. So I had to put this in here because when a lot of clients that come to me, they've already, my boss has an OKR. In fact, some of the most popular books in the world, books like Measure What Matters, they have, in fact, the most popular OKR example in the world, remember that baseball example? The general manager has an OKR, and then everyone tries to align to it. So, and of course, that has led to so much misinformation. So that's why I put this in there. So no, avoid, you don't want the boss OKR. So the idea, the best thing is if there's strategy, you often hear most consultants tell you, you need good strategy to do OKR as well. That's fine. But I'm not one of those. If you don't have good strategy, you can identify a good opportunity. That's a good thing to set your objective around. In the absence of an opportunity, a well-defined problem. This is where startups play. In the absence of a problem, the mission. You want to put people on the moon, or in your case, you say you want to bring accessible leadership, actionable leadership information to leaders in America or in India. You see, that is the mission, but not generally avoid the boss.
Got it. And well, to summarize so far, we looked at all the activities, outcomes, impact. We then prioritized all of them, converted them into OKRs. Now, how do we ignite them? How do we activate them in a business?
Good question. And this is where I come to say, what do you do when you create an OKR? This is, when we started this podcast, you mentioned something, the set it and forget syndrome, right? This is exactly what happens. What do you do after you create your OKR? Because there's often the euphoria of, oh my gosh, we've created, if you do a good job and create a good OKR, you've heard this psychological effect that says, don't tell people your goals, right? Because just telling people your goal, in your brain, your goal that you've just created is indistinguishable from actually accomplishing it. So it's just, just relax, right? So most people want to do that is that they tend to create an OKR. They just forget about it, and then they realize the end of the quarter is here and we've not done anything. That's the set it and forget syndrome. And then sometimes to just go about this haphazardly, okay, let's just try some things and see what we can do to move these key results. That's a traditional way. OKRs. Again, I decided to create this tool. Again, I created this tool called the OKR Activation Canvas to solve this problem of, to solve the problem of set it and forget, right? This is the general framework of activation framework. I call it reverse engineering. Now, there's two levels of strategy. Corporate strategy is a set of choices that your company has made that informs the OKR that your team creates. Then your team creates OKRs after the setup and prioritize phases. An OKR is an output of the prioritize phase of the span process. Make sense? Now the question comes is, how will we actually accomplish this OKR? What is the micro strategy? What's the team level strategy for this specific OKR, right? And that's how we come up with this reverse engineering process. So you start here. This is what you want to accomplish, your OKR, what we want to accomplish. You've already done that, right? Now, the first question you ask yourself is necessary condition. What has to be true in order for us to accomplish this OKR? What has to be true of our market? What has to be true of our business model? What has to be true of our staff? Because those are things that tell you that if these things are true, then you stand a chance of actually accomplishing your OKR. Now, once you answer that question, the next one is leading indicators. Remember, your key results are lagging, the evidence that you've accomplished it, right? But the problem with lagging indicators is that they are not sensitive to the work that people are doing. So you don't do an exercise and then step on a scale and see that you've lost weight. Never happens. Right? You don't fast one day and step on a scale and see that you've lost weight. But you can see reductions in things like insulin, for example, or the number of steps that you've taken, or your resting heart rate. Those are signals. Those signals are leading indicators. So you just want to come up with a couple of few. So what are leading indicators that will tell us that the work that we are doing is leading us in the right direction? Make sense? And now when it comes to the work, the biggest mistake that tends to happen, okay, there's sort of very big mistakes here, is that people say, what should we do? You see, my process goes, it is not about what should we do. What should we start doing? It is important. But more important, there are things that you must stop doing. Remember, strategy is about a choice. In order to win, there are some things that you will stop doing. There's some things that you must do less of. And also, rather than always looking for something new to start doing, maybe it's an existing thing that you need to do more of. So I call this the activity engine. And the way it differs from most OKR activity, most OKR advice out there is that, sure, there are things that you should start doing, but also look for existing things that you're already doing that you should do more of. But also you have to realize that because you've made a choice to go in one direction, as determined by the strategic inputs, there are certain things that the team currently does now that you need to stop or do less of. So that answers the question. Then, obviously, for all of this, you need what? You need skills, you need a budget, and you need tools. So once you can answer these questions, you have the kernel of a micro strategy for each OKR. So there's a lot more certainty that the team knows what exactly it needs to do and what it needs to stop doing so as to increase the chances of accomplishing this OKR. And the reason I came up with this was, James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
I often have one of these discourses which I adopted the quote of OKR says, we don't rise to the level of our OKRs. We fall to the level of our OKR process. And this is the OKR process that I had to design for myself and I use for my coaching clients and my students. Because once you do this, then the team, it is not, just go and try and see what works. I mean, there's a systematic, logically rigorous way of the things that you're doing, the things that you're not doing. And of course, I created a canvas that articulates it, right?
Nice.
Your OKR,
no, totally.
OKR comes in here, your necessary conditions, you go to what should you start doing? What should you stop doing? What should you do less of? What should you do more of? Then, as a result, what are your leading indicators? Once you're doing these activities, what are the signals that will tell you that you're in the right direction? Right? What are the skills and people that you need? What are the things that you need to buy? This is where budgeting comes in, right? And then finally, there's always risk and blockers. What are the risk and blockers that you might encounter? And then there's a back pass. This special arrow here is, what can I do to eliminate the risk and blockers? Usually it means you start doing something, you stop doing something, do more or do less of. So that is the canvas that does activation.
Yeah. Well, just to summarize, when you have the OKRs, so it's important that we also have some leading indicators to help us understand how the key result needle is moving with the activities. And we can then use that to decide whether to, if something is working, do it more. And if something is not working, do it less.
Exactly.
And also make sure that we have people, which means skills and processes and budgets and tools available to achieve these things. But I have a question here. I mean, this looks
so. Let me just give you something. This is what you are doing, right? This is what you're doing. Summarizing. These are activities that you are doing or not doing, and together they will give you signals. It's like let's take back the example of personal health. You choose to fast or you choose to go for a walk or for a run. Those are the activities. A leading indicator is your calorie deficit, right? So it is these things that drive the leading indicators, the signals that are highly correlated with accomplishing the OKR under these necessary conditions. And of course, you need these skills and people. And you might, for example, you might need to buy running shoes, hiking gear, etc., etc.
Yeah. So one thing that strikes me right away is that getting to a perfect OKR process looks like a practice that one needs to. It's a culture shift. It's a change in mindset, and it needs to really become a habit to really be able to think in terms of leading indicators, lagging indicators, activities, outcomes, and impact. Now, what is the suggested cadence? Like, is this something, all this thinking has to be done before we start with the OKR process? Two questions. Like, what is the suggested cadence for OKRs? And let's say we are at a quarterly cadence. All of this should be done before the quarter starts or just after the quarter starts?
That's a good question. So now, if you're starting OKRs for the very first time, right? The setup, prioritize, analyze, and nurture. If you start, so let's take a quarterly cadence. Setup and prioritize can take 1 week. Right? Because you do this my preferred way of doing this in all hands, a team all hands, right? You just, meet for half a day, for say 4 hours a day for 3 days a week. You can do setup where you create a super canvas, you identify your metrics, you get the input of the strategy, right? And you create an OKR. You can do this in 1 week, right? Activate, you do this 1 day of the next week. Then you have the remaining. So maximum, I could say this is 2 weeks. You do this 2 weeks, and then you spend the remaining 3 months is how many weeks? 12 weeks, right? So the remaining 10 weeks in nurture. Nurture is where the work actually gets done, and then you as a manager, you're providing coaching, you're providing feedback, you're providing support. Now, the next quarter, it can become even shorter. You can do setup prioritize and activate. You can do all of it in 1 week and then spend the remainder of it. And then the more you do this, then you can literally do it in 2 days or 3 days. The more you do it, the shorter the setup, the prioritize and activate steps can be. And of course, this is predicated on the fact that, one mistake I see so many people make is they say, oh, every team should have 3 to 5 OKRs, please. That is someone anyone who tells you that, that's evidence that they've never done OKR. 1 OKR per team per value stream. 1. Anything more than that, you're just fooling yourself, because you're actually going against one of the benefits of OKRs that it brings focus. You can't focus when you have 3 OKRs. Impossible. 3 OKRs and 3, that's 9 key results. That's no focus.
Yeah, agree. And let's talk about the last stage in this process. Let's talk about the nurture part of the span process here.
Good. The nurture is literally, you're actually, now all of these activities that you said you're going to start doing, do more of, right? This is where you develop them, and then the team just goes about doing their work. But it is now work with the filter of, this is why this matters. So they use the OKR, and they use the OKR to say, this week, so let's say I am an engineer, I write code. What am I going to do this week? I'm going to choose it. What I'm going to do this week, I have to select what I'm going to do this week based upon its impact on the key results or KPI. And I'll know that it's working if I can show that one of the leading indicators that we already worked on is going to move. And now this is why it's so important that you create this with the team. And OKRs, key results, must not be tasks. And this is one of the biggest examples of mistakes that people make. They make the key results tasks. But the problem with that is that once you make key results of tasks, you have deprived your people of the opportunity to choose what they get to do. But if you leave them as outcomes or impact, then you're giving all of your directs the freedom to say, every week, choose what you want to do. That is tremendous opportunity for growth and flexibility. And of course, because you created a simple canvas, they know how, they know the engine, right? They know how I do this. This is what goes up and all of that. Then you've got the leading indicators and all of that, and the results metrics and the production metrics. So they know when they make a decision, you have already trained them because of this thing that you co-created with them, how that decision can pan out. Okay.
Awesome.
So the nurture part, which is simply on a weekly cadence. Okay. On Monday, you're having, if you do sprints once every 2 weeks, you do planning, sprint planning. Right? As to do your sprint planning, you take your OKR system input and your OKR activation canvas input. If you're doing a weekly basis, you do that. Then on a daily basis, each person is choosing what to work based on this. And while all of this is happening, what is your job as a manager? Your job as a manager is to provide feedback on the things that people are doing, to provide coaching, to negotiate support, to communicate so that, silos don't begin to emerge. You communicate with your team, with your peers, with your boss, and sometimes with customers. And that's what nurturing is. And that's what it means. So specifically, in my nurturing process, when I teach this, I say there are 3 important meetings. The weekly planning meeting, where you check on the OKR. Okay, this is our OKR, guys. Where are we? You look at what are our leading indicators? What are the key results? Where are they? Okay, what activities are we doing this week in order to drive them? What activities are we doing more of? Right. And then that's on Monday, weekly planning, or if you're doing sprint once every 2 weeks. Now, during the week, in your one-on-one sessions, you get to speak to each person. Okay, tell me, James, or tell me, Anush, what are you doing this week and how does it help us accomplish our OKR? Right? That way, you get to see how each person is thinking strategically or not. You provide coaching and you provide feedback. You can tell them, okay, by the way, this is what you've chosen to work on this week. What made you pick that one? And then you get to see their thinking. You can provide some coaching. And sometimes you can say, hey, okay, I'm stuck at this. Can you help me work this out? So that is what you do week in, week out for the next 10 weeks. It's boring stuff, but a couple of few things that you repeat over and over.
Yeah.
And that's so there were 3 meetings: the weekly planning meeting, the one-on-ones. And one of the things I do once in a while, I call an all hands. Sometimes in your one-on-ones, you realize that people are getting stuck because maybe they misunderstand the implications of some decision. So what I tend to do is I organize an all hands where we bring the whole team together. We pick a specific problem to solve. Hey guys, we've been doing this amount of work for the last 3 weeks, but this signal, this leading indicator should be moving, but it's not moving. What can we do? So you bring all heads in an all hands session for the next maybe 2 or 3 hours and try and solve it. That is extremely powerful.
Yeah. Totally. Simple, profound, and powerful. The more I learn about this, the more I realize how important this is. But today we've created something that all the chief of staffs or the CEOs or especially frontline managers can tremendously benefit from. This is such a simple and at the same time a profound way to achieve goals and coach your employees at the same time. So you as a manager, now you have a goal and you know how to coach employees or your team as well. But yeah, this is awesome. And do you want to add any more details to the deploying part of it?
That's the last part I want to talk about. Again, this I just want to go through the complete tool set that I developed for this. One of the ways to think about the work you do is that you think in terms of bets. You say, I'm going to try this thing and see if it works. If you come up with an idea, right? Rather than, come up with an idea and then furiously go start writing code and designing, develop it into a bet.
Okay. Awesome. Mukom, so, we just discussed what nurture is, but let's say if I have an idea for the team, idea for what the team should be doing, how do I go from there? Can you help me articulate or understand better using this framework?
Perfect. So the thing is now, one of your ideas could be, after your brainstorming session, you might say, okay, we want to increase market share in India. And the idea is that we should create a Bollywood viral video, right? A Bollywood dance viral video. Remember, this is just one sticky note. Now, one of the biggest mistakes to do is that, okay, you have that idea and then you jump straight into, okay, fine, let's start looking for dancers, looking for sets, looking for tunes. That's a bad idea. And that's why we have this tool called the bed canvas. This helps you develop your idea so that there is a lot more intellectual rigor to your idea. Right? And so let me just quickly show you the bed canvas. This is it. It says every idea that you have is because there's a hypothesis behind it. Right? The hypothesis that we believe that if we do this thing, maybe if we create a Bollywood dance viral video, it's going to help ingratiate us with the Indian audience. Or if you're trying to move it to Africa, if you create an Afrobeat viral video, it's going to help make us attractive to the African market. So that's your hypothesis. Because the reason I like this is because in the absence of a hypothesis, you always resort to the fact where the highest person in the room or the loudest person makes noise. The reason you start with a hypothesis is that at the end of it, you can say, yes, we did this, and it is because of this that this is working. So once you come with those hypotheses, you say, fine, what are the outputs? Okay, what's the output? That idea, what's the output that you're going to create as a result of it? You put it here. That's the output. Who is going to use that output? Maybe the student in India or professional working in Africa, or a farmer working in Wyoming. And what are the benefits that are going to get? So you simply, again, you simply step by step desired outcomes. What will they get when they watch that video? Maybe it's going to educate them about how to save money in the stock market. Whatever your product is going to do, right? Again, you look at leading indicators. This could come from your activation canvas and then key milestones, right? So you break this into maximum, about 3 to 7 big steps. Remember, what you're trying to avoid is to go from a sticky note idea and then start writing code and doing all of this. You want to articulate it, the milestones. And then what are the skills that are required? What is the budget? Who are the stakeholders? And then blockers and risks. And so once you do this, the most important part of this thing is that it's a tool for communicating with the rest of the team. You have an idea. On a sticky note, there's this idea where you sit in a meeting, you think we understand. No. But when you put it on a single page, and that's why I always create these things to be one page, you people will argue and fight and make this better. Then you go discuss with your peers in other teams, maybe suppliers, right? But you guys didn't think about this. You guys didn't think about this. You gather those ideas, you refine them before you start putting tasks in Jira or ClickUp and then start doing them. And that's what the bed canvas is. Make sense?
Awesome.
Good.
Absolutely. Love it. And this is a shift in thinking. This is a shift in thinking of people. I think if they can embrace this kind of thinking, the impact level thinking, the rather than activity based thinking, I think a lot of the wastage that's happening in terms of people doing things that don't matter, it's like it's like a cutting down the wastage, and there is a plenty of wastage out there in the industry. Well, if you are a chief of staff or a chief operating officer or a frontline manager or a business leader who care about the results, I think this is the content to look at. But really appreciate your time, Mukom, and much appreciated for sharing all these frameworks that you had come up, you had put together out of the need from coaching a lot of these people. So this is coming really from the front lines. This is not some imaginary framework, but something that came out of the need of coaching people to embrace this kind of thinking and OKRs especially. Much appreciated. Thank you for your time today on this spot.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, and have a wonderful day for you. And it's time to sleep for me.